morning, everybody, and welcome to October's Entrepreneur Roadmap Series event on doing business with the government. At this time, I'd like to invite up Laura Springer of our partner law firm, Venable.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Venable. We are a proud sponsor of the DC Economic Partnership, and this monthly series is held here at Venable to support the local entrepreneurs and give practical advice for how to succeed. I think today's presentation is going to be an excellent one. It's going to address how to work with DC agencies and obtain government contracts, which can be, a dicey business. Venable has been a long-standing partner of the DC Economic Partnership. We like to support local entrepreneurs. We are a full-service law firm with over 600 attorneys across 9 offices. We have one of our largest offices here in DC, but we also have offices in Tyson's Corner, Baltimore, New York, LA, San Francisco, and some other smaller local offices. We have a full-service team of attorneys that can address all of the business needs of any company. We have a government contracts group, which is very well versed in the work that is needed and the pitfalls that can, that people need to be aware of for compliance issues. I'm an associate in the corporate group, and we work with entrepreneurs from formation to exit. So we are really there to help you know how to form your business, what types of contracts you might need for your business, and we're really there to help you through the process. We also have commercial litigation practice and an intellectual property group, and we have a very strong regulatory group. And I'm going to turn it back over to Stanley, who's going to introduce the speakers for today, and I hope that you find this helpful.
Again, I want to thank Laura and our partner Venable for all that they've done for us. Again, today's event is on doing business with the government, obtaining government contracts. At this time, I also want to acknowledge our president and CEO, Keith Sellers, at the partnership. So who are we? What is the Washington, D.C. Economic Partnership? We are an ecosystem of all of the resources the city has to offer and connecting them with you guys, the people who are trying to do business with the city. We promote neighborhoods, DC neighborhood attraction and retention. We also help with site location assistance and economic development research. If you'll take a look at the publications in front of you, those are for. We have the Doing Business in DC guide, which helps you figure out all that you need to do to start a business in DC. And then we also have the neighborhood profiles, which gives you all of the metrics on all the DC neighborhoods. We'll also be releasing our DC development guides, which tracks all of the development in the district. Site location assistance. If you're a business that's either trying to stay or relocate to the district, if you reach out to us, we can help you find space in the district for your business. The International Council Shopping Center, which is also known as ICSC, we also participate in that to help retailers to relocate to the district. I also want to take this moment to highlight our annual meeting and Econ Showcase, which will be another networking and marketing event to really showcase your business and also connect with district agencies and other like-minded businesses to help promote economic development in the city. If you're really trying to take your marketing and networking of your business up to the next level, this is an event that you would want to be at. Demelia Shaw, if she's in the room, can she raise her hand? She is not in the room, but if you reach out to anybody from the Washington, D.C. Economic Partnership staff, they can connect you with how to register for this event. The Development Showcase, again, is a part of our annual meeting. It's going to be an event with over 50 exhibitors, all different companies doing business with the city, also some government agencies. So if you're looking to connect with businesses and agencies, this is the event for you. We also provide space finding tours. So we load up a luxury bus full of guys just like yourself, architects, developers, contractors, tech businesses, anybody trying to do economic development in the city. And we take them around the city and we show them all of the different opportunities. Our next scheduled tour will be in January, and it'll be of the Georgia Avenue, Tacoma area. So if that's something you're interested in, please check out WDCEP.com for more information. We also have the Accelerate DC program. That's geared towards tech companies, helping them grow and mature throughout their process. Erica Moore, if she could raise her hand in the back. If you have any interest in joining the Accelerate DC program, please speak with Erica. Again, for more information about the Washington, D.C. Economic Partnership, please check out WDCEP.com. At this time, I'm going to introduce all of the speakers. Once I introduce the speakers, I'll call them up one at a time. They'll present. Please save all of your questions for after all of the speakers speak because they will come up for a Q&A session. So our first speaker will be Andre Chambers. Andre Chambers is co-founder and CEO of Andre and Chambers LLC. Prior to being co-founder of Evans and Chambers LLC, he was a software developer at the American Management Systems. He is a graduate of the University of Richmond and a member of the American Small Business Coalition. Then will be Jen Shoss. Jen Shoss is principal of Jen Shoss and Associates. She began her career working at Dun & Bradstreet Corporation. She's worked with the DEA, the FBI, and CIA to help companies secure government contracts. She also enjoys the arts and holds quarterly government contracting meetings at the Kennedy Center. She's also received several leadership certificates from UC Berkeley and Cornell. And then finally, we have Judith Stackhouse, who is the lead small business specialist at the General Service Administration. She assists in counseling and small business services and is a trusted advisor committing to securing government contracts for small businesses. Again, please save all of your questions for the Q&A session. And at this time, can I please have up Andre Chambers?
Good morning. I'm very excited to be here with other entrepreneurs and folks from the DC, National Capital Region, and Virginia area to focus a little bit on winning business in the federal government space, and specifically how small business goes about doing that. So I'm going to share a few things about Evans and Chambers. All things will not be right, all things will not be wrong, but this is the way we do business and how we've been successful. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys and hearing your stories as well. Evans and Chambers Technology, we're focused on a few things, but a few things in a few areas. For the most part, we're a management and IT consulting firm. That's a common term. However, the things that get us up in the morning are those type of activities that promote a national interest, national security, protect a national asset. When I look at our colleagues across Evans and Chambers, most of us are IT developers, and we're focused on a few things along the lines of immigration, counterterrorism systems, and also law enforcement. I mentioned this just a few minutes ago. Whether it be immigration or a war fighter, our intel analysts, or cybersecurity, these are some of the places that Evans and Chambers sits now. Right now, we're in about 5 different agencies, DOD and intel, as well as civilian. DHS, FBI, some of the 3-letter agencies, DIA, and a few others that I'm forgetting. What I've noticed that's most interesting about small business is that a lot of it's about mitigating risk. Why would government want to do business with us? It's a key question. And if you don't know that going into whatever conversation you're about to have with a stakeholder, you're already at a loss. I think for small business, it's important for us to know our value proposition. And that value proposition isn't really the X's and O's and the blocking and tackling that you would normally think about. It's the relationship and the ability to fortify that relationship while mitigating risk for that particular government customer. So I'll talk a little bit about how we've been able to do that in these particular spaces. So in terms of our service lines, here's your typical meatball chart. I think all of us are familiar with that term. But these are some of the technology areas that we support and some of the agencies that we support them across. With Evans and Chambers, we quickly had to find out what was going to be on our to-do list. It's also even more important to understand what's on your not-to-do list. So when we're talking and when you're talking to your federal government customers, they want to know, what is it that you do well? Not everything that you do. What's your value add? Because your value add is actually how you mitigate risk. It is that one thing or those few things that you do quite well. And in doing those things, you're creating a unique value proposition that no one else can. For us, it's these areas across these agencies. And so we turned this on its head and brought it up 20,000 feet and looked at the problem sets behind those technologies that we support. So for those same agencies, those technologies in the former slide are pushed against national imperatives. Counterterrorism, insider threat monitoring, personnel security, big data and documented media exploitation, legacy system modernization, mentor protege programs, immigration systems, defense training, cross-domain communication, and secure information sharing. These are the problem areas that we've decided are going to be on our to-do list. By show of hands, how many of you all are doing business with federal government or DC right now? Okay. And how many are looking to break into that same space? All right. So I'll try to tailor my comments given that. However, once again, knowing what's on your to-do list and what's not on your to-do list is very important for your customers to understand. So a few things to know about EC. We're an 8A hub zone small disadvantaged business. We have our top secret facility clearance. You'll see some of the GWEX and IDIQs. So when we go back to the X's and O's, these are some of the things our government customers want to know, but first they want to know our value proposition. Second, they want to know what's the easiest way to get to you if I actually enjoy what you have to say and I actually need that. And so that's very important to lead in that particular way. So on to the capture management. For a small business, I think it's incumbent to do things a little differently than your large business counterparts. Some of the systems that are readily available to us and that are free are listed here. You might find the need to go out and purchase a Deltek account or a GovWin account. I think those services are quite good, and they do reduce the time to market. However, many of the things that we can do to foster growth in our organizations are readily available to us via the internet for free. It's just a matter of knowing how to utilize those tools. Whether it be historical data through FPDS, Fed BizOps looking future focus, sources sort and RFIs, and I'll pause on this. This is a great opportunity for us to sever work for a small business. Typically when I talk with small business offices and contracting offices, and you all have probably heard the same, these sources sought and RFIs are purposely put out there, waiting for small business to respond and say, you know, I can do all of this, or there's a portion of this that I can do. You might want to consider severing this for small business. And this is my unique way and unique approach to do this. By the way, we've done it in these agencies before. Oh, and I happen to hit some of your small business goaling as well. So please look at those sources sought and RFIs. The ability to be able to articulate what we do well is more important than what we do. If we can't write about it, if we can't speak about it, it really doesn't matter. Sources sought and RFIs give us that opportunity. In terms of your research, the Exhibit 353, these are great documents, especially for those in the IT arena. We often look at these to look at the major capital investments that the agencies are focused on that we're targeting. So when you look at the 300 and the 53 is going to show you everything that particular CIO has to report to the Office of Management and Budget regarding their IT investments. It's a great opportunity to understand where you might fit in and whether your services actually have a play. Whereas the 300 is going to focus on those major IT investments. Going in armed with that particular information when you speak to program helps them understand that you appreciate what they're going through right now and you understand their business. And your message should be shaped appropriately. Obviously, the agency strategic plan. So when I showed the meatball chart a little earlier, the first meatball chart focused on technology. The second one focused on a more macro view, the business impact or the mission impact. That comes from the agency strategic plan. Understanding where IT is going to be applied and to what end and to what impact. We don't build systems just to build it. We build them for a mission impact. And lastly, your industry days, a great way to develop those relationships. As you're working towards any particular capture effort, you want to develop a call plan. And typically your industry days are a great way to help fortify your call plan. So to look at this in a silo, I'm not sure if this will be offered to everyone afterwards. But to look at this in a couple of silos or a couple of chevrons here, there's typically pre-solicitation, source selection, and post-award. And in your pre-solicitation, that's probably where small business is going to be doing most of its work. That's where you're going to be creating the differentiators, creating the value proposition for why this opportunity should go to small business, and why they should go with you. So from opportunity identification through production, you're trying to shape the opportunity. because once that solicitation goes out, it's in source selection, and there's less, if any, opportunity to speak to those same government counterparts, because obviously you don't want to have any conflict of interest. So typically, Evans and Chambers, we focus a lot on the pre-solicitation activities. We're looking 12 to 18 months out before the opportunity is going to drop. That's the patience that's needed at the very least. And during source selection, we're doing a lot of reflection. What did we do wrong? What did we do right? And how can we change that the next time around? So in terms of post-award, let's say we win it. During post-award, this is the opportunity to reinforce the decision that government has made in you, in choosing you. At the same time, it's also an opportunity to figure out, what did you really want? I saw what you wrote, and that might have been just the quickest way to an end. But what did you really want? How do you plan for us to onboard, to transition? And what other success factors, not trying to go out of scope here, but what other success factors do we need to understand within your environment to really get you to where you need to go? When looking at this, understand the actors. And I'm closing here as I think I'm out of time. Your program managers and stakeholders, they have the mission requirement. Your contracting officers, they're going to help to inform you on the procurement strategy. Historically, how have we bought these goods and services? And the Office of Small Business, use them as your advocate. Help them to understand there are some small businesses they can advocate for and why they should. Quickly, 30 seconds or less. I think it's also important for a small business to understand that as you're growing, you're always going to be juggling this scale here between cash value and enterprise value. And there are certain things within the small business community that definitely affect your cash flow. Socioeconomic designations, 8A contracts, subcontracting opportunities, time and material contracts. But those things have a lifespan. So as you're looking at that, you want to make sure that you're not looking at just cash flow. In my opinion, not looking to just be a lifestyle organization, but a high growth organization. So therefore, make sure you're focusing some of your energy, and especially as you start to grow, into developing that enterprise value that matures you from a trusted small business to a trusted large business. So if you'd like to talk further, I really enjoyed my time here, and thanks for the opportunity. But if you'd like to talk further, here's some of my information. I look forward to chatting with you afterwards.
Again, I want to thank Andre Chambers for that great presentation. And I see a bunch of you guys taking pictures of the PowerPoint. All these slides will be available online after the event. At this time, I'd like to invite up Jennifer Schoss.
Good morning. First of all, I want to thank the Washington, D.C. Economic Partnership for the invitation to speak. Thanks to Venable for hosting us, and thanks to everybody for coming out this morning. What I'm going to go through is a quick 10-minute presentation talking about doing business with the government, but particularly from the vantage point of federal contracting. Okay, a quick background, even though Stanley had already given you a little bit of details. I've been in federal government contracting for about 20 years, both as a contractor and now currently running a consulting firm in DC, helping companies, both product and service companies, local and international, to help them do business with the government. Our primary service offering is the GSA schedule, which is simply, I would call it a vendor shortlist. So this is going to be companies that have been pre-vetted, providing a lot of detail and information about either the products or services that they offer, focused mostly on your pricing. So once you're on this list, it then allows the federal government to buy directly from you, knowing that you've been vetted and that they're getting the best prices for your services or products. It is in no means required to do business with the government, and I'm sure Judith Stackhouse, who's here from GSA, will talk in more detail about that. The other piece is that we do work with small and large businesses. Some of the small firms are women-owned, veteran-owned, in hub zones. Hub zone is a historically underutilized business area, and you can check your hub zone status on the SBA website, which would just be sba.gov. Getting that certification can certainly help because there are going to be contracts that are set aside for some of these small businesses. So as far as the federal government, one important thing to know is that the government is the world's largest purchaser of goods and services. They buy anything from airplanes to zippers. art teachers, dentists, hairdressers. Those are some of the services that you wouldn't think about that the government actually utilizes. So those examples were either used for in the prison systems, and then DoD will run some of the schools at military bases, so they need teachers and so forth. So it's not just the things that you hear about on the news, such as cybersecurity and national defense. There are a lot of odd services that are also procured by the government. There are specific rules on how you purchase or how the government purchases, and those are all dictated by something called the FAR, F-A-R, and it's an acronym that stands for Federal Acquisition Regulation. It's about the size of 2 Moby Dicks, so it's not the most interesting reading, but it does let the contractors know what's going into the decision-making for the government when they're either putting out sources sought, RFIs, requests for information, RFQ, requests for quotes, or RFP, requests for proposals. There's also contracts that are set aside specifically for small businesses. So with a show of hands, can you raise your hand if you are a small business? Okay, so a large majority. And I've got some strategies here on how small businesses can actually win contracts either directly with the government or as a subcontractor or teaming partner to other companies. This is the government sector, both on the federal side and the state and local, is one of, I think, the most unique sectors to do business with, because there's so much information that is available publicly. Andre Chambers, I think, provided some of those details, such as FPDS, which stands for the Federal Procurement Data System. So that website's going to be fpds.gov. You can go in there and type either the industry that you're in, and all the contracts that have been procured in that industry will show up, along with the companies that have won those contracts. You can then sort that by specific agencies to really get some information on how to create a business plan and which agencies you're going to have the greatest potential to do business with. We'll move on to the next slide. These are some requirements. The first couple are actually required to do business with the government. The ones at the bottom are ones that I highly suggest. So if you're just starting out in business, you will need a tax ID number. Obviously, you would get that from the IRS. Beyond that, Dun & Bradstreet, which is a commercial credit company, will then have you registered in their database, and you'll be assigned a DUNS number. You'll need this DUNS number to then register in something called SAM. SAM.gov stands for System for Award Management. These are just some of the really basics. On top of that, once you're registered there, you should have what's called a capability statement. This is more or less your business resume that should really have bullet point information about your company. And this is something that you would hand or leave behind to some of the contracting officers that you're dealing with or trying to sell to. You should also, highly recommended, have a B2G, business to government business plan that segments what agencies you want to sell to, where you're going to have the greatest challenges, and where you're going to have the greatest opportunities. Doing business with the government, especially at the federal level, they focus a lot on past performance, meaning what contracts do you have under your belt. If you're just starting out in federal government, it can be quite overwhelming, so maybe you want to start at the state and local level, get a little bit of experience under your belt, and then graduate up to the federal government. And then you will need to write proposals. So that is one part. It's a big time investment, and at times you may see an RFP that either you think, wow, you read it and you say, this was written for me. But you've got to realize, as Andre mentioned before me, it is a 18 to 24-month sales cycle. So there was probably another company or companies that were in talking to the contracting officer prior to you. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't submit, but writing proposals can be time intensive, and time is money, so you need to make those smart decisions. Some strategies, as I mentioned before, have a strategic business plan. Know what your value is. A lot of times as small businesses, you say, oh, we can do it all. Make sure you focus on the one or few things that you do and do those well. Again, diversify, just like you would in your retirement portfolio. You're not just going to have all stocks or all bonds or all mutual funds. Diversify with state, local, and some of the quasi-government agencies, World Bank, IMF, IFC. And we're positioned in a great spot here in Washington, D.C. to be able to do that, so take advantage of your location. Teaming and partnering is certainly helpful, and it's one avenue to get some quick success in government contracting, specifically for small businesses. And you want to make it easy for the government to purchase from you. So you can do that through the GSA schedule, which again is a contract vehicle or a mechanism for the government to get to you, and some of the other certifications if you qualify. The SDVO stands for Service Disabled Veteran Owned. There's women-owned certifications. There's 8A, which is the Small Business Economically Disadvantaged certification, and so forth. As far as some teaming and partnering ideas and strategies that you can use, as I mentioned, there are subcontracting requirements. And this means that the large businesses that are doing business with the government have to parse out a certain percentage of their work to small businesses. SBA also puts out a scorecard, sba.gov. Do a search in there for a scorecard. They rate every agency on how many contracts they gave to small businesses. The requirement there is that overall the government should be giving 23% directly to small businesses. For subcontracting, that percentage is actually higher. So that works in your favor. That percentage is 34% is the subcontracting goal. So every agency will get an A, B, C, or D. Maybe you pick an agency or two that has a good grade. They have a greater propensity to award contracts to small businesses. And then maybe pick an agency that got a failing grade that needs to get their number up, and that way they've got more incentive to do business with you. GSA eLibrary, and I'll kind of run through this real quick, is going to have a list of all the vendors that hold GSA schedules. And next to each company's name will designate if they're small, and that'll have a letter S for that, W for women-owned, 8A, and then O for other, which means that that's a large business. Ding, ding, ding. That means that the other companies then, the large businesses, need to share a portion of their work with small businesses. And I'm going to show you how to get there. And this is just a snapshot of that GSA eLibrary. The third column from the right is where those designations are, and you'll have all of that information about the company, their company name, their email address, phone number, and so forth. That's kind of the directions on how to get there. I also had the SBA dynamic database as another mechanism to search. So if you don't have a certification that is required in an RFP, you can find another company to team with. So that's the SBA dynamic database. You can just do a Google search to get there. And I'm wrapping up here. Conclusions. The government market is certainly competitive. There's a very long sales cycle, so it's not for everybody. If you get into it, again, you want to diversify and have some other streams of revenue and not just rely on the federal market, because you will encounter situations such as CR, which is continuing resolution, budget cuts, which are certainly happening all the time, government shutdowns, which we have seen in the past, and sequestration. The unique thing about state and local government, however, is they have a different fiscal year, so their sales spikes will be at different times. And they are not going to have, they will have budget cuts, but they're not going to go through a continuing resolution or shutdown. They cannot have budget deficits. So that's a good area to diversify. And you just want to make sure that this sector is actually going to be an asset for your company. And that's it. Thank you. Hopefully I didn't go over.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for that. At this time, could I get Judith?
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Judith Stackhouse-Jordan. I'm from the General Services Administration, and I really like to know who I'm speaking with. So if by a show of hands, if you're a business that is in the IT service industry, please raise your hand. And if you are a business that is into management and consulting and program management, raise your hand for me. And if you are in the construction or facilities or operations and maintenance environment, raise your hand for me. And then one last question is, if you are a GSA schedule holder, please raise your hand. Okay, great. It's kind of hard to follow Andre and Jennifer because they pretty much did my presentation before I got here, which actually makes it great for me because it just validates the things that I was going to go over with you. I won't rehash all of the things that they went through, but I will talk a little bit about GSA. GSA is a federal government agency who is uniquely solely devoted to offering technology, acquisition, and real estate services to our federal partners. What that means is that we want to be the primary buying agency for all federal customers so that they can focus intensely on their mission, which could vary depending on the agency. I did hit on GSA's mission, and I think it's important to distinguish between the fact that GSA does buying for our internal needs, but we also do purchasing for other federal customers. We have priorities that are outlined in our mission, and if you notice, the third category actually outlines expanding opportunities for small business. So GSA does that through many resources. You heard the GSA schedule was mentioned earlier. I have a slide of that in my presentation. You heard about the dynamic small business search. You heard about teaming. But what I think is important to understand is that even though federal agencies buy independently those services and goods, products and services, we want them to use us to buy those products and services. And we have many mechanisms to facilitate that. Jennifer mentioned earlier that the federal government is a very active buyer. These statistics for the federal government overall from 2014 show that we spent over $440 billion. Well, I looked up the total this morning for FY 2015, and the preliminary numbers reflect that we spent over $356 billion in FY 2015. As you can see, of that $356 billion, our preliminary spending for the General Services Administration was $3 billion. So that is a minute part of the federal spending that we are actively looking to increase, and we look to small businesses as well as large businesses as our industry partners to help us to provide the services through acquisitions, real estate, and IT and technology to our federal customers. So that's where you come in. You're our partner. Now, remember, because GSA is a customer agency, we service customers. So that means that it's very competitive to be a contractor with the General Services Administration. The reason being is that we want our customers to be happy. So we're going to present and introduce and provide vehicles and strategies for our biggest and brightest to go directly in front of our potential buyers. But we also offer other avenues so that you can build your business and make yourself positioned to work for the federal government. I think Jennifer did a great service by saying that it's not for everyone, and it's something that you have to determine as an individual business owner. I mentioned we're comprised of two business units. One is the Federal Acquisition Service, and the Federal Acquisition Service is the business unit that manages that GSA Schedules program. You've heard of GSA Schedules. You may have heard of GWACs, which are government-wide acquisition vehicles, and basically those are contracts that GSA sets up with businesses such as yourself who offer goods and services that the government buys reoccurringly. If you get on that list or you get a contract, because it's often referred to as a list, but it's actually a contract that's not funded, then you have the ability to sell to the federal customer agencies. We also have a unit within the Federal Acquisition Service that's called the Assisted Acquisition Service, where we go in and actually manage contracts for other federal agencies. The Public Building Service is considered the largest commercial real estate basically organization in the country. We manage and lease owned and lease space to our federal customers. So my regional administrator likes to say she provides housing, clothes, IT, and transportation, travel, anything that a federal customer would need is what GSA provides. And those particular goods or services are provided through the various mechanisms. It could be the GSA schedule, it could be the GWACs, and it can be, which are, again, government-wide acquisition tools. You may have heard of Alliant and GSA Stars. But just remember that our business line expands over many products and services. So to figure out where you fit in is most important. I wanted to get this in early. There's a blog site that we have. It's called GSA Interact. And this is really where you want to go to find out about any initiatives about through GSA. And remember, you're finding out about initiatives through GSA, but remember, our business is to support all our federal customer agencies. So all of those topics and subjects would be relevant to any of the federal customers that you would pursue. One thing I would say about Interact is that it really gives you the most up-to-date on some of our really hot initiatives, such as the Federal Strategic Sourcing Initiative. You notice that it appears, based on preliminary numbers, not only did the federal government spend $100 billion less, GSA spent $1 billion less in FY 2015. And what that is saying is that we hear you. We're spending your money more effectively, and we're still providing the services. But what that does mean is that there are a decrease in the number and volume of contracts. So you really have to be strategic in how you position yourself as you set out for federal work. Jennifer was did a great service by saying it's not for every federal customer, and there are other mechanisms to work with the federal government rather than working directly. So this blog site will give you up-to-date information on many from our BMO project, which is a building management operations project that's going to be zonal, to our FSSI, the Federal Strategic Sourcing, to the Alliant and the GWAC contracts. And the first community you want to join is the small business community. You heard mentioned earlier about the SBA scorecards, where I am happy to say that GSA got an A the past 2 years, and we expect to be online for the next 2 years. The scorecard basically outlines our efforts not only to meet our goals, but to mentor small businesses, to break down any barriers that might prevent you from working not just with GSA, with the federal government. Interact will give you a forum and an opportunity to comment and to help us understand from an industry standpoint what's important to you and how you can provide solutions. Andre, I believe, mentioned, don't just come in looking at what we're asking for, because sometimes we don't know based on the industry. That's always an opportunity to tell us what you can do for us. Now, the government is on a very long acquisition timeline, so what you may find is it may not apply to that particular opportunity, but networking and developing relationships, it usually takes at least a year, because people have to feel, for lack of better words, warm and fuzzy. The risk has to be mitigated. They have to understand that you know their process, and it becomes a personality thing that you have to build on relationships. So I got the 1 minute from Stanley, so what I'm gonna do is kind of move forward to the one slide, or well, not just the one, but one of the slides that I think is very important, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up for him. This is very important. What products and services are you offering? Do you know your market? Just because you perceive we buy it, you have to really do market research to determine how we buy it. We may buy it as part of a bigger service, or it may need complementary services. So understanding how your product and service fits into the rotation is very important. What do you consider when you are presenting your products? And not only that, considering their value to us. Are they innovative? What does that mean? Are you applying and implementing the best practices in your service industry? Is your pricing fair and reasonable? Do you possess an expertise in-house that is reliable? Because one thing that the federal government considers as it relates to risk, are you depending on too many outside principals or resources to be able to complete a particular contract? And again, I can't hone in on that word enough. Solutions. What do you offer us? Never go into a meeting saying, "What can you do for me?" It may be a friendly icebreaker in your opinion, but it's just not the best way to start a meeting. But you go in prepared, understanding what the customer needs before you get there, and just to be able to present that will help you to really connect with them and minimize the time that they spend explaining to you what they need. You want to get in there and take advantage of that time to tell them what you can do for them. And always go to a meeting with an expectation. If you go to a meeting and they listen to you and they shake their head and they say, "Oh, this sounds like something we would like," Ask them, how often do you buy those services? Are you funded to buy these services? How do you buy those services? When is the last time you make an award? And do those type of researches in advance as well as after you have that meeting. And go there with an expected takeaway. Ask them, well, how do you see us fitting into your particular operations going forward based on what you heard today? Not based on what you asked them, but based on what you presented as your company's capabilities and ability to provide solutions. They mentioned several resources. This acquisition.gov is where the FAR is. Two things: if you don't know the process and procedures that a contracting officer uses to award contracts, you're way behind the curve. The FAR outlines everything that they need to consider when they're making a federal award. So acquisition.gov, USA Spending tracks your spending, tax dollars, not just by contracts, but also by grants, loans, and other financially funded programs through the federal government. The data for contracts is filtered through FPDS, but it's like probably a week behind. FPDS, Andre spoke about earlier. One thing that I find really useful is that middle section where you can go in, you can put a NAICS code or a keyword, and it'll actually, if you go home today and do this, it'll actually bring back awards that were made as of yesterday under that NAICS codes nationwide. So it's a good way to see how the government is spending. But both of my preceding speakers talked about knowing the strategic plans, the OMB. One thing GAO reports, that tells us what we're not doing right. That's a great opportunity for you to come in and offer us solutions on specific project problems or processes that you see have been identified for improvement. The federal supply schedule, I know many of you will have questions. You can reach out to me after today, but you have to be in business 2 years. There's a minimum revenue generation requirement. The great thing that I want to highlight about GSA schedules, as of recent, they can do set-asides to small businesses on schedule. So you need to understand how that can work. I'm going to skip through these because you'll get the slides. One thing I would like to, focus specifically on is, if you're not ready to work for the federal government, the best way to build that very important thing you need, past performance, is through some of these mechanisms. Subcontracting and mentor protege is a real good way to build relationships, but network among yourselves in this room today. I met video programmers, I met marketing representatives. We've heard that there are IT companies. How can you all work together to combine solutions and offer a total package to the buyer? And then lastly, SAM.gov, I just want to talk about the dynamic small business search. That is where our buyers, we go to locate firms that are under certain socioeconomic categories and under certain industries. So make sure that your SAM.gov as well as your dynamic small business search registration is up to date. Again, check out the forecast, look at the websites. The goal is basically visibility, familiarity, integrity, trust, and confidence. And we have offices all over the country. I would be remiss if I didn't introduce my colleagues in the back. If you could just raise your hand. Latasha Lee and Charles Acock are both from GSA, new employees that are here to stomp the ground for small businesses. So I'm happy that they're here today. And again, check out our websites and definitely give me a call or email me if you have any questions, because I realized this was pretty quick. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Judith, for that. At this time, could I have all of my presenters please come back up for the Q&A session? All right, do we have any questions from the audience?
Malcolm Barnes, Minority Business Resource Institute here in Washington, D.C. I'd like to focus a minute on the local business market. In a hearing earlier this year, the budget director for the District of Columbia presented a $2.17 billion point-by-point rundown of agencies in D.C. What's your read from Venable's point of view on the existing small business utilization program in the District of Columbia that I believe requires a 50% utilization of SBEs and a 35% utilization of subcontractors on contracts over $1 million. Anybody familiar with the local market, District of Columbia government?
Well, I'm federal government, obviously, but I do, partner and speak with my colleagues in DC quite a bit. And from what I understand, they are very aggressive in their small business goaling practices as well as their minority business inclusion. There are various ways that you could kind of plug in if you're familiar with the Small Business Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. They actually work with state and local government to facilitate connections and I guess to dispel myths that may be barriers for small businesses to work with the state. It just varies depending on the locality and the service industry that you're interested in. But I do know that the Office of Minority and Business for DC would definitely be probably the first place to start. I'm not sure if the DC government has forecast of contracting opportunities as the federal government does, but if you see me afterwards, there is a project at St. Elizabeth's East Campus, and we have a project at St. Elizabeth's West Campus, and I understand that the representative from DC government may be at our next monthly meeting, and I can also give you her information so that you can, connect with her directly about the programs they have.
We have a question right here.
After I registered for the Dun & Bradley, there is another company amongst that, company that sent me an email that if I want to be noticed and, be viable in the business there, so I should be able to pay them. Is that correct, that I have to pay to get some preferential treatment?
So it sounds like you registered for the Dun & Bradstreet to get your DUNS number, and I'm not sure who the company was that contacted you. Do you have a name?
Yeah, it was the same company. They said it's the Dun & Bradstreet. Yeah,
okay.
They contacted me and told me that if you want to get noticed and somehow your company will be this and that, you need to pay like $500. So I was a little bit concerned. I did not respond, but is that a viable thing to do there?
You may not need to, and I'm assuming that Dun & Bradstreet is just offering you the credit monitoring service. So I actually started my career with Dun & Bradstreet and worked in their government office where we sold that data to the contracting officers and program managers. But it sounds like they're offering you the opportunity to monitor your report so that you would then be alerted when other companies or entities are pulling up your credit report. I don't think it's necessary or something that you need at this point.
Okay, then, 10-4. Thank you.
I would agree.
I'd just like to add a little bit to that. Andre spoke earlier about some databases that would be available for a fee. I think what you really have to think about is what is your individual business case? What is your budget for marketing? And how will the particular resources that you would have to pay for reduce time for you or make you more organized? It's a business decision. You don't need any type of consultant, or you don't have to pay any fees to work with the federal government. But I have found that it varies. Some newer companies that are well in the capacity level and have past performance, they may have a person that they bring on board to market for them directly. Other firms that would be considered a little more experienced and that have more contracts, they may feel the need to pay or hire a firm to assist them with certain practices. But what is very important, regardless of your decision, is what I thought about when our first speaker came on. If you're a small business owner and you do not have a lawyer, then you are swimming in a tank with sharks. Whether it is an ongoing legal representation that you can consult about contracts, or someone that you have full time, you need someone that can review contracts, review any type of legal documents that you would be entering into, to make sure that you understand what your expectations are from what you are getting. That would be the one thing that I would say. Make sure you have a legal representation.
I think with regard to D&B, just quickly and tactically, I agree totally. You don't need to pay for that service. That's your short answer. I've also been solicited the same way. I think there's a credibility core, which I think is a little separate for Dun & Bradstreet, similar name. So, so just watch out for that. That credibility core provides a different level of services that are paid. But Dun & Bradstreet, obviously you need a D&B number. But I think, you can monitor that yourself in terms of the activity. Typically, right before contract award, or, several weeks, maybe a month before, if you're being considered, that contracting officer is going to look at your D&B profile. So that's something you can do yourself, where you can check your profile and make sure your profile is very representative of your particular organization, and that doesn't require the monitoring service, because I understand that that $500, there might be opportunity cost for that, right? Yeah. To the former question, just very quickly, I think, there's probably a question behind the question in terms of DC government and small business. What the goals are and what actuality is, there's sometimes a gap. We're exploring that now. The way we're approaching it personally, don't have a silver bullet answer, but the way we're approaching it personally is to make sure they understand the viability of small business in DC at all these particular opportunities. Maybe to be a groundswell, and perhaps I'm idealistic, but I do see the gap, and we're taking a grassroots type of approach, meeting them where they are to help them understand what type of businesses are in DC that they could procure from.
Just a footnote, there's Inspector General's report that came out at the end of the Gray administration. There was a $774 million underutilization of small businesses by 4 key agencies. I'm optimistic that the Bowser administration will turn that around.
Understood.
We had a question.
This question is for Jennifer. You mentioned that there's some RFPs that come out and you think, wow, this was custom made for me. But it's already been drafted for somebody else. What kind of advice can you give us to position ourselves to be ahead of the game?
Well, I think Judith touched on some of these points, attending networking events, industry days. Industry days are, every agency usually has one at least in a 12-month period. You'll find these on FedBizOps, so fbo.gov. You can search if you just plug in the industry day. And those are basically an open house for small businesses to come into the agency and review budget forecast and so forth. But back to the RFP, you could make a decision to respond and invest the time and resources to write the proposal. And if you don't win, one strategy could be is that you then ask for a debrief. A debrief, you need to request this within a certain time frame. I can't remember if it's 3 or 5 days. Judith may know, or Andre. And this gives you the opportunity to go in and sit down with the contracting officers, and you'll more or less learn what you did well and what you did not. They won't show you the winning company's proposal, but they will say, here was the price that it came in at. So that's a good way to maybe build some relationships, and who knows, maybe the vendor that won the contract is not going to perform, satisfactory. So when that comes up for a recompete in the following year, you've already built some relationships, you've gone in and talked to the contracting officer and shown some of your capabilities. So you're not just a cold company coming in. But again, this is going to take some time.
And one more thing might be to, generally, when a contracting officer buys a particular type of service, they usually buy that service or product reoccurringly. If you get in a little late on a particular procurement and you do say, because that's what we really encourage you to do, I can do this, I've done this, then it's healthy to go back and try to get a meeting with them and say, I got in a little too late for this particular procurement, but how often do you award these? Here are some practices or policies that we would have brought to this project that would be helpful. And the other thing is when you're looking at expiring contracts, I would, because, we are changing the way from the federal perspective that we buy things, visit with that contracting officer midway through the contract, even if there's an incumbent there, just to find out, do they expect to buy the services the same way when they re-procure in a year or two? Because that will help you kind of, focus your strategy to market and make sure that your business capabilities are in line with the new technology, because 5 years is a long lifespan, and technologies and practices and needs change significantly over that, as opposed to I would say 10 years back, you had a little more consistency in the types of projects would be awarded over that time frame.
Question in the back? Do we have?
Yes. Can you hear me? My question is for Judith. With regards to the GSA contract or schedule, I know it's a lot of information. It's a long application. How long after you start a small business should you even attempt to apply? And also, are you able to use past performance from a company that you worked for previously as opposed to your own company?
There is a 2-year requirement for business, for a company to be in business, to submit a GSA schedule offer. The best approach is to consider what you have a past performance in and what you plan to offer the federal government. If you sell ink pens, then your schedule, you should be proposing to offer ink pens. If you sell ink pens, but you think you can sell cups real good, but you're not selling cups, don't offer cups through your GSA schedule. What they look at is what have you sold, whether it was in the federal or the commercial market, that is in line with what services or products you're offering. The second question was how long did it take? What was the second question?
You worked for a company for X amount of years,
Yeah.
but now you're starting your own. Can you use the past performance from that company because you don't have that with your own company yet?
No, you cannot use the past performance from another company as a validation of your firm's experience. However, as a principal of the company, the experience that you bring at that level as a principal would be considered when you get to the resumes and the professional staff that you provide to support the contract. So the best approach is to make sure that you had a past performance. And what Jennifer showed you under the GSA schedules is a great way to align yourself to be prepared to get on the GSA schedule, because you can go to the particular schedule that you're going to offer products or services under, and you can look for subcontracting opportunities with those firms. And I would challenge you, the other category, which is large, is great, but I would also challenge you to look at other small businesses, because ironically, 80% of the GSA schedule holders are small businesses. And I think that one disservice that small businesses does, and I see it improving over the last couple of years, is you all have to get together to be competitive and find out how you can complement each other's services. So if you look at us, when you go to that GSA schedules website, it'll show you everything that that company offers to the federal customer, their rates, everything they offer. Cross-check that information with information that might be at their website, because they may be offering complementary services, but that may not be their niche. They may have a main niche, and you may be able to be a trusted partner to provide those complementary services. And I think that's a great way to build past performance to get on the GSA schedule.
I'd also like to add real quick, as far as the GSA schedules, make sure you're not just getting it just to say that you have a GSA schedule. Make sure you have a reason, meaning 3 or 4 potential government customers that purchase your products or your services through the schedule. With all due respect to GSA and to Judith, GSA schedules are just one of many ways that the government can purchase from you. There's other contract vehicles that are out there. Navy has their own, Navy Seaport E, DHS, Homeland Security has Eagle, and there's a bunch of other contract vehicles. And the GSA schedule does come with terms and conditions. It is a contract. And if you don't meet some of these contracts, GSA will cancel your schedule. Judith had mentioned in one of her slides the $25,000 sales quota per year. There's about 20,000 vendors on GSA schedules, and 63% of them have a big fat goose egg next to their name. So they're not meeting that sales quota. So either they put that GSA schedule proposal together in-house and spent their own time and resources, or maybe they hired a consultant or a company to help them with that. Don't spend money until you know that there's ROI, return on investment, or you're going to actually make money by having that vehicle.
We had a question in the back.
I wanted to add on to her question. So to get that 2 years past performance, you need to kind of build up a stable of your own clients or find some subcontract opportunities. Is that
Right.
kind of what that?
And those can be commercial or federal clients, non-scheduled. So, there is flexibility in that consideration.
I actually had a question for Mr. Chambers. what opportunities do you see in the big data space outside of DoD, and what are the technologies that you would use?
Well, I think that big data space specifically. So anytime you have a large amount of data and you're looking to distill intelligence from that data, there's an opportunity. That's a macro answer. So yeah, with the war fighter, that's pretty obvious, right? But I think, also in the private sector, there are plenty of those opportunities where you see cross sections of data, whether it be public transportation, could be one, public safety could be another, where you're looking at cross sections of data from different data stewards that only through that aggregation of data can you distill real intelligence and real context. I think those are the real opportunities for big data, where you're not looking at one data steward and how much data they have and how you can distill intelligence, but how you're looking across data stewards that might be across agencies. And your service is able to bring that data forward and distill intelligence in a great way for that end user. In the case of DoD, it's the intel analyst or the war fighter, but in private sector, it's the same difference. So those are the types of things that we're looking towards now, and that's how we view big data. Yeah.
We have a question right here.
Hi, this is Noor, and I am an IT resource. I did all this big data and Oracle other things. Now I want to be entrepreneur, and that's why I attended this seminar. I think after attending everything, my feeling is I have to go through subcontracting. So do you have any seminar specifically focused for subcontracting?
So we do not have the partnership a specific seminar on subcontracting, but I'll let our panelists speak if they have any programs.
Well, Jennifer mentioned FBO.gov, where federal agencies post industry days as well as outreach events. So I would definitely recommend that you would look for those type of opportunities. From a GSA standpoint, if you go to www.gsa.gov/events, you can locate any training or subcontracting networking events that will be hosted. And I encourage you to plug into your procurement technical assistance centers. Those are great resources, as well as other economic programs, such as the one that is sponsoring today.
So I would add on top of that, great comments. So the PTAPs, PTAP, Procurement Technical Assistance Programs, every state has at least one. The one in DC, I think, is run by Milton. I'm trying to remember his last name, Goodman. There's one out at GMU for anybody that's in Virginia. They offer classes on government contracting. Another resource are SBDCs, Small Business Development Center. Every state, I believe, also has one. SCORE.org, SCORE. That's another resource for entrepreneurs, helping you put together business plans. And the one in this area is actually, I think, housed at the SBA headquarters downtown. So keep those in mind. And then also, if you do find a large company, whether it's Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, CSC, Raytheon, go onto their websites, because they will usually have a site or a section on their website where you can register as a small business, and then you'll be then kept abreast of opportunities that you could partner with that organization on. So make sure before you reach out to these large prime contractors that you have gone through that registration process, because that'll be the first thing they ask you. Second thing they're going to ask is for your capabilities statement.
Along those same lines, I would say, think about those individuals that you've worked with in the past that, from a subcontractor perspective, have some type of management authority and budget authority. In the private sector side, there's Lockheed Martins, et cetera. Those program managers, those capture managers that are looking at Section C or looking at that statement of work and saying, I don't have that particular skill set. You want to make sure that you can speak to that particular skill set. I would be looking directly at your relationships and understanding the procurements you want to be a part of, looking at that Section C, looking at that particular requirement that you think you're best suited, and making sure you speak with that program manager or capture manager 18 to 24 months ahead of time, and position yourself to be able to speak to that particular client or that particular portion of the statement of work.
We have a question right here. And we have time for 2 more questions after that. The young lady in the back and up front, and that is all.
Hi, my question I think has partially been answered, but I'm not 100% sure it has. If you're trying to offer an innovative solution on a scale that's really not conducive to being a subcontractor in a sense that it's not small enough, it needs to be big enough, but you're not big enough to be at that $25,000 level and up, what is the best way to get in and offer a service to a government agency? If it's a combination of, like you said, transportation and big data, but it's an infrastructure solution, and it's not out there, it's not being requested by an agency, you want to tell them this would be a great way to go, but you're sitting there with that big fat zero on the revenue because you're a startup. How do you get, and you can't use your past resume and your past experience. Yeah. You're kind of sitting there going, am I out of luck? How do you move forward there?
I'd offer 2 suggestions here. One, you could send an unsolicited proposal to the agency. It may take a while for them to review it, but that's one. And if the technology is not yet ready for sale, there's SBIR's Small Business Innovative Research, where the government partially funds the company and the technology until it is ready for sale. Other than that, I'm not sure.
I go right ahead.
No.
I definitely agree with the SBIR approach. You want to look for those agencies that are looking for innovation, and then those avenues they provide for outsiders to provide that innovation. So when you see that, I'll use Defense Intelligence Agency for an example. They have what they call the Needopedia. Okay, they're stating their needs, and they're looking for those unknown actors to come in and provide innovative ways to meet those services. However, at some point in time, it's going to come down to mitigating risk. You're an unknown. So that, not you specifically, but, you may be an unknown. So at that particular point in time, when they buy into your product or service at the onset, then at that point in time, you might want to think about partnering with a known and trusted entity to mitigate risk. So someone that understands their environment, understands their culture, but yet you understand your product and service, and the coupling of the two creates a great win-win for government.
Another quick resource that I thought about are incubators that are popping up all over. So especially in DC, 1776. Eastern Foundry is one over in Crystal City, which focuses just on government contractors. Again, those are really good resources as well.
We had the question in the back and then up front, and then that will be all.
Yes, I would like to know from whomever can answer the question, how do I get in direct contact with a Venable attorney who works mainly with startup groups to have an attorney available if I should need one?
Well, I guess I'll need to answer that. I can talk to you afterwards, and we can connect, and we can reach out to Venable and see if there are any opportunities, but I can connect with you afterwards for that.
Okay, thank you.
And last question up here in the front.
There was a lot of talk of needing past performance if you are trying to get into that space. How do you frame your past performance when you are applying for certain contracts? So I currently have past performance that I've done through other worked with other partner with other companies. So how do I frame my past performance working with them in terms of my company?
I think that one of the most important things is to understand what was your company's impact. And if you can describe that impact in quantitative terms, great. Qualitative, that's okay too. But you have to understand the mission impact. A lot of times for small business, if you're subbing, your impact may be narrow because of where you're sitting and where your resources are sitting. You really have to educate your resources on the ground to understand the tasks that they're doing, but the why behind it. Because at some point in time, you need to articulate that in the past performance. So it definitely needs to be very quantitative, very macro. How do we save time and money? How did I help my program manager get from X, to Y? Those are the types of things. So for an IT firm, when I'm talking about past performance, I'm getting very tactical here. I'm not going to discuss how many releases that we pushed out. It's too micro. I'm not going to necessarily discuss all the different languages and the whole technology stack, to maybe some small degree, but it's more about what that software provided, what type of opportunity cost did it help enable, That's what's most important.
Yeah, and just being able to frame that information, the quantitative part is very important. The qualitative part is important as well because each agency has a different culture, and even though it may appear that they're buying the same product or service, what their interest in how that will be applied or how it has been previously applied or how your method would improve their processes is also a big part of their consideration. Sometimes, I mentioned earlier, we don't know what we want. We have a general idea, and there's oftentimes there's room for you all to advise us on the technology and approaches that you have that can make us more efficient. So one way to plug into those is looking at things that we've awarded previously and being able to strategically point to the ways that you would have been able to save them money, time, or a process if you would have applied your particular method to that acquisition.
I want to thank all of our panelists again for their great presentations. Next month, our event is on branding and marketing. I invite you guys to all please come out and attend that event. Lastly, I'd like to thank our partners and sponsors, Venable, Verizon, Capital One, Jennifer Shawson Associates, DSLBD, and also the SBA. And thank you all for attending the event this month.